Well, good morning, folks. I'm so glad to be back with you. That flu was no joke. I ended up resorting to Pedialyte to replace all the fluids my body was losing. Well, I would not wish that on anybody. Since I only provided a quick update in the place of last week's show, I was not able to fill you all in on everything that happened the week prior to me getting sick. So this week's update and episode will be jam-packed with all that info. I submitted my petition to get on the ballot with more than enough signatures this past Friday, and I received official word from the Election Commission that I qualify to be on the ballot. For all the local listeners that signed my petition, thank you very much. This episode is coming to you all once again from Midland, Texas, as I'm working with a client again. This trip will take me from here to the very east side of Texas and then back again. There will definitely be some extended windshield time during this 3-week engagement. Also, one of the members of the team I am working with has moved on to a better personal opportunity, and he will be sorely missed. So, Marcus, if you're listening, thank you for your leadership, mentorship, fellowship, and most importantly, your friendship for these past few months. I pray that you enjoy continued success in all of your endeavors. But back to the update, folks. I met with some people from Young Americans for Liberty on Saturday before last. Yep, even as sick as a dog, I spent an entire day with them and a few other candidates for office here in Tennessee. It was very informative. I also met with some voters that are involved with another grassroots leadership organization this past Saturday afternoon. Some great ideas were shared, and I even passed out some campaign yard signs. There were also a couple of campaign or political meetings that I attended, which I hope to have bear fruit during this election season, and I'll share more information about them here in the near future. As for the title of this week's episode, it would seem that our General Assembly is doubling down on its usurpations, while at the same time passing some good bits of legislation. Their behavior has me thinking at times that they collectively are either bipolar or just plain corrupt. Now, here comes the standard campaign disclaimer. The following content is approved by Larry Linton for TN12, candidate for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House of Representatives District 12, Larry Linton, Treasurer. With the disclaimer out of the way, let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. All right, folks, to kick off this segment, I'm going to talk about some developments for the podcast, as well as for the campaign. First off, the podcast and related topics. I recently reached out to Congressman Tim Burchett on X, formerly known as Twitter, the other day. Let me tell you all, there are a few elected officials that expertly troll the trolls on that social media site, like Congressman Burchett and Tennessee State Senator Frank Nicely. If you're not following both of them on that platform, you need to do so. If not for the information they share about legislation they are working on, then definitely do so for the hilarious way they engage with the communists' useful idiots. It provides for a great way to break up the often dull research into proposed legislation that I conduct. Anyway, after a couple of hilarious engagements that I read, I reached out directly to Congressman Burchett on X, and he responded right away. I reached out to ask that he come on my podcast as a guest. In his reply, he directed me to make contact with a member of his staff to make those arrangements. His staff came back to me the same day, and we talked for a bit about my program, and they informed me that they would be looking for an opening in his schedule to come on the show. That will be an awesome show, ladies and gentlemen. And as soon as I hear something, I will share it with you all. I will put it out on all my social media sites. I have to say, this is a refreshing change from the way my own Congresswoman's staff has been handling the scheduling of her appearance on the show. I've been going back and forth with them for months now. There have been multiple exchanges between Congresswoman Harshbarger's staff and me for nearly a year now, and we are still not any closer to having her come on the program. We shall see what we shall see, though. As for Congressman Burchett coming on the show, I hope this comes through very quickly. I also had the opportunity to appear on a couple of shows while I was home these past few weeks. Both shows were quite fun. The first one I appeared on was actually my second appearance on the Common Sense Conservatives. The second one I appeared on was the Patriot Punk podcast. The hosts of both programs are quite fun to work with, and if you can watch them, please do so. On both shows, we discuss pieces of legislation moving forward here in the Tennessee General Assembly, as well as some of the atrocious activities of the central government in Washington, D.C. Speaking of D.C., I hope that you're all as pleased as I am with the announcement that U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell is stepping down as the Senate GOP leader. Nothing pleases me more than to see a member of the Uniparty remove themselves from a leadership position. As to who the new Senate GOP leader will be, only time will tell if this person actually follows their oath to the Constitution. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has not been solidly conservative enough for my liking. He's been quite disappointing in so many ways. But as I like to remind the listeners to this show and tell people along the campaign trail, there is not much we can do to fix the central government in Washington, D.C., other than to elect different people than the ones that are currently serving. However, the best weapon we have in our arsenal to fight against a central government that has gone rogue and turned tyrannical, that's our Constitution. That wonderful document was designed so that the primary check against federal overreach are the state governments. As it stands right now, though, through decades, heck, more than a century now, a century of usurpations by the central government of the state's powers, this will be a hard fight to win. But it can be done, ladies and gentlemen. The way to win against government usurpations of liberty is to elect people that understand the vertical and horizontal separation of powers put into the Constitution, and to not vote for people that will either not fight back or will just go along to get along. You don't win by electing a person that has a nearly 100% record of voting with the majority in whatever elected position they are serving in. That is what looks like when people are elected that have a track record of quote unquote following orders or just participating in the tyranny of the majority. Now, in the case of local government, that could very well be the tyranny of the minority, where a small cadre of people that serve on city councils or county commissions, they work together to either enrich themselves or their buddies. Sure, these usurpations are hardly noticeable. They often take the form of rezoning at the local level, where property can be rezoned to suit the purposes of elected officials and to increase the amount of revenue a city or a county can generate with the different tax rates. One only has to look around Sevier County to see the amount of rezoning that is taking place, all to increase the coffers of the government. If you don't know what I'm referring to here, and if you live in Sevier County, just keep following this podcast and you'll become enlightened. It isn't just limited to the county level or Sevier County alone, folks. A look at our neighboring counties can reveal the same problems with government usurpations, either through rezoning or even using eminent domain to condemn land so that the government can then turn around and sell it to a developer that will come in and build something that will increase the tax revenue. While we here in Sevier County may feel like we are a unique group of people, to those that serve in government, we are all just the same as other citizens around the state and around the nation. We are merely considered sources of revenue for the government. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, more on this and other General Assembly shenanigans on the other side. With that, I'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. Let's talk a little bit about a bill, a liberty protecting bill, that is stalled in the Tennessee Senate this past week. When something like we are about to talk about happens in the General Assembly, it really causes me to question the motivations behind every bill they propose and consider. For example, a great liberty protecting bill which fights against the woke alphabet mafia intrusion upon religious freedom, it passed the General Assembly and was signed into law by our trans-Republican Governor Bill Lee on the 21st of February. Of course, right here I'm talking about House Bill 0878. One of the topics I discussed on the Patriot Punk podcast a couple of weeks ago ties into this recent bill. The Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. Well, that decision, when carried to the extreme, denied people their religious liberty. That is something that is rarely considered when these type of federal actions come down the pike. The second and third order effect that often rob the liberty of groups of people in unfavored groups, in this case, Christians. Anyway, that federal action, that is what a Supreme Court decision is. It's a federal action. That federal action resulted in forcing people under the color of law to violate their religious liberty and officiate or solemnize same-sex marriages. Well, our General Assembly actually passed a law that protects those officiants from being forced to go against their convictions and against the tenets of their faith. Score one for the good guys, you would say. But for every one of these victories for liberty, there are many more instances where legislators fold like a cheap table chair, which leads me to believe that the members of the General Assembly are either bipolar or they are not that terribly concerned with securing the people's liberty, just securing their donations and lobbyist money and perks. This is leading me to a recent bill that would have secured the rights of parents in this state to not being forced to co-parent with the government. In recent years, the issue of parental rights has become increasingly contentious, with debates arising over the extent to which parents should have autonomy in making decisions regarding their children's upbringing and education. Senate Bill 0620, proposed in the Tennessee General Assembly, it aimed to address this issue by bolstering protections for parents' rights. However, the bill has encountered significant hesitation within the Assembly, raising questions about the underlying reasons for the reluctance, like I mentioned. They all either have a collective mental disorder, bipolar, or something other than the liberty of their constituents is guiding their actions. Some are saying that in order to understand the hesitations surrounding Senate Bill 0620, it is essential to examine the historical context of parental rights here in Tennessee. Now, while the state has recognized the importance of parental involvement in children's lives, previous attempts to codify these rights into law have faced challenges which are hard to understand. Senate Bill 0620 sought to clarify and strengthen parents' rights in various areas, including education, healthcare, and religious upbringing. The bill aims to affirm parents' authority as the primary decision makers for their children and limit government intrusion into familial matters. It is hard to believe that we have reached the point in our nation's history that we actually have to put this into law, but here we are. Supporters like myself argue that Senate Bill 0620 is necessary to safeguard parental autonomy and preserve traditional family values. However, despite its benefits, Senate Bill 0620 has encountered resistance within the General Assembly, which, by the way, folks, is a Republican supermajority. Do not forget that fact. There may be several factors that contribute to this hesitation, they say, including concerns about potential conflicts with existing laws and statutes, ambiguity surrounding the scope of parental rights. I don't know how there could be any ambiguity about that. And opposition from interest groups advocating for alternative viewpoints. Just what interest groups would be in opposition to this bill? I think you all know the answer to that. The first would be public sector unions. The others are advocates of big government, communists, in other words, because we all know you cannot have communism unless you capture the kids. This bill would go a long way to preventing the communists from achieving that goal. One of the primary publicly stated reasons for the Assembly's hesitancy to pass the Senate Bill 0620 is the potential for conflicts with existing laws and legal precedent. Critics argue that the bill's language is overly broad and could inadvertently infringe upon other rights, such as those of children or non-custodial parents. Additionally, there is apprehension about the bill's implications for state agencies and educational institutions, which may be required to navigate conflicting mandates if the bill becomes law. The commies in government and government indoctrination centers are definitely apprehensive about that bill. Another publicly stated factor contributing to the Assembly's hesitation is the ambiguity surrounding the definition and scope of parental rights. While proponents of Senate Bill 0620 assert that it clarifies and strengthens these rights, opponents argue that the bill lacks specificity and could lead to unintended consequences. The commies and alphabet mafia are perfectly okay with the unintended consequences of other federal actions like we previously discussed. Without clear parameters delineating the boundaries of parental authority, there is uncertainty about how the bill would be interpreted and applied in practice. Now, the opponents of this bill are quite uncomfortable with just how far this bill would go in loosening their grip on our nation's children. In addition to legal and procedural concerns, Senate Bill 0620 faces opposition from interest groups and advocacy organizations with divergent viewpoints on parental rights. Those that believe our children belong to the government and not the parents. These communist groups argue that the bill prioritizes parental autonomy at the expense of children's welfare, particularly in cases involving issues such as healthcare and education. Others raise concern about the bill's potential to undermine efforts, now get this, to protect vulnerable populations, such as the alphabet mafia youth or victims of child abuse and neglect. Beyond the substantive issues surrounding parental rights legislation, the hesitation to pass Senate Bill 0620 may also be influenced by political considerations within the Tennessee General Assembly. Lawmakers say they must balance competing priorities and navigate complex political dynamics, including pressure from constituents, party affiliations, and relationships. Now, get this, here it is, with interest groups. That's the crux to many of my problems with situations such as this. Political dynamics and relations with donor and lobbyist class be damned. When it comes to children, parents are the sole authority. That is a fact that has been constantly attacked in this modern era of big daddy government stepping in to replace parents in their children's lives. Now, watch this bill closely, folks. If it dies in committee or is put on the summer study program, you know that the communist interest groups have won this battle, which should cause you all to engage much harder with your elected officials. I'm going to pause for a break here and pick this up on the next segment, so I'll be right back. And we're back, folks. We'll kick off the final segment of this week's show with a call to action. Well, I'm not issuing this call to action. I'm definitely echoing it. Brandon Lewis, the founder and editor of Tennessee Conservative News, issued this call last week. Brandon stated that it is rare that he will give an all hands on deck call to action where he wants the people's full support and participation. However, this is definitely one of those instances. For more than 3 years now, the Tennessee Conservative has been the only media outlet in our state telling the truth about rampant illegal immigration, along with the Tennessee Republican Party leadership's stubborn refusal to do anything meaningful about it at the state level. The Tennessee Conservative News has been the proverbial lone voice in the wilderness, sounding the alarm on this issue. In every poll conducted among GOP primary voters, Tennesseans say illegal immigration is the #1 issue that should be tackled at the state level, a fact that Republican leadership ignores. They are not listening to the pleas of their constituents in their districts. Illegal immigration costs Tennessee taxpayers about $1 billion every year. That number will keep on climbing thanks to the open border policy of the current central government's administration. The number of illegal immigrants that have entered this country is in the tens of millions at this point, and many of them have made their way to the volunteer state. Cheap labor drives down the wages for blue-collar Tennessee workers, which is sadly an incentive for employers to look the other way on citizenship status. We have to turn off the incentives for these criminals that are making their way to our state. Yes, I said criminals because that is a fact, folks. The very first act these people did when entering the country was to break the law, which is why every month violent crimes are committed by illegal aliens all over Tennessee. People that are not worried about breaking an immigration law, they're not afraid to break any other laws. Our government schools, who are already struggling academically, they are being inundated with illegal aliens that take away from the educational experience and resources for Tennessee kids. This alone costs the taxpayers of this state almost $600 million every year. Hospital emergency rooms are being used like doctors' offices at the expense of taxpayers and insurance premiums. Our criminal justice system strains under the pressure. Our social safety nets have become hammocks for people who are not even from our country, much less our state. The useful idiots and enablers of the leftist media in Tennessee say that this is all just fine, that there are no negative consequences to our economy, our culture, school, jails, hospitals, or welfare programs. We all know, though, that is a lie. Further, the GOP leadership just points to Joe Biden, wagging their finger, yet they do nothing to assert our state's rights on this issue. So, to call attention to this in hopes of getting Tennessee lawmakers to listen to the cries of GOP primary voters heading into an election, Brandon Lewis and the Tennessee Conservative News, they are hosting a Protect Tennessee Borders rally on March 20th on the Capitol steps in Nashville behind the Beth Harwell Plaza at 1 p.m. Central. Brandon needs all of our help in this endeavor. He states that here is how we can make a difference before it's too late. First, he needs as many people to show up in Nashville as possible. Bring a crowd with you. If GOP primary voters, conservatives, and patriots say that illegal immigration is their number one issue, yet we fail to act and build a large crowd, GOP leadership will not believe our will is for real change. That's why it's imperative that you to come to this event personally, bring a friend, organize a carpool, whatever you have got to do. You can visit Tennessee Conservative News website to register. The second thing that can be done is that organizational leaders of conservative groups across the state, they are needed, their help's needed as well. If you're an organizational leader, please email this information, announce it in meetings, post it on social media, and text your entire membership list so we can build a crowd. I myself have shared it on all of my social media sites and will continue to do so up until the event. Every time a conservative organization in Tennessee has an event, Tennessee Conservative News, they run a notice for you. Now, Brandon and his team needs our help to run a notice for him. If you are thinking you can bring a big crowd and want to be an organizational sponsor for the event, just email Brandon at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. They could definitely use the help. Now, thirdly, post this information everywhere you can. If you have a personal or organizational social media account, share the image Brandon has created along with the link as often as possible. We need to make sure the General Assembly hears directly from us at the front door of their office building. Sadly, though, I will be out of town, out of state for this event, but I hope to interview a few people that plan on attending the event for this podcast. If you do attend and are interested in coming on the program, just shoot me an email to Larry at libertyleadershipandlies.com. Again, that is Larry at libertyleadershipandlies.com. I'm going to pause right here and come back for the closing of the show with God's word, as well as wrap up this forum. So I'll be right back after this brief pause. All right, folks, we're back for the closing segment. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe the members of our General Assembly here in Tennessee are either one, they collectively suffer from some sort of bipolar mental illness, or two, they propose and vote on legislation according to the will of special interest groups and lobbyists, and not their constituents, and they do so for their own self-interest. The elected members of the General Assembly can pass legislation that will serve to turn the tide of illegal immigration in the volunteer state, or they will kill these good bills, thereby doubling down on their usurpations of the liberty of the legal citizens of Tennessee. Now, some of these proposed bills are like this one, putting illegal immigrants who commit violent crimes behind bars for life. That's House Bill 1872 and Senate Bill 2770. Now, this proposed law aims to deter those who are coming across the southern United States border and making their way to Tennessee with the intention to engage in drug or human trafficking. The next bill is increasing fines for transporting illegal aliens into Tennessee. This is House Bill 2078 and Senate Bill 2802. This proposed law prohibits any person from transporting an illegal alien into the state and increases the fines from $1,000 to $5,000 for doing so. Another bill is increasing fines for transporting illegal aliens into Tennessee for commercial advantage or private financial gain. This is House Bill 2432 and Senate Bill 2034. This bill will increase from $1,000 to $5,000. The fine for transporting into the state for the purpose of commercial advantage or private financial gain an individual who the person knows or should have known has illegally entered or remained in the United States. The next bill is require Tennessee law enforcement to report illegal aliens to the feds, which is House Bill 2124 and Senate Bill 2576. This proposed law requires, rather than authorizes, law enforcement agencies to communicate with the appropriate federal official regarding the immigration status of any individual. Now, these are just a few of some good pieces of legislation that are sort of starting to turn off the incentives for these illegal immigrants coming to Tennessee. I urge you to contact your state representative and state senator to encourage them to pass these bills. If they fail to secure the citizens' liberty with the passage of these bills, you know they are doubling down on their usurpations. There's another thing you can do as well. Submit an open records request to each of your local school boards and ask them for the number of students enrolled that require English as a second language taught. In your request, ask for the numbers for each year starting in 2018 through the current school year. Once you get the numbers, forward them to your representative and ask them if they support this drain on our tax dollars and the erosion of social safety nets for the legal citizens of their district. Then publicize the responses. These facts need to be made known to every voter. I've submitted my request to the Sevier County Board of Education last week, and I'll let you know their answer when I receive it. All right, folks, that is all I have for this week. Today's wisdom from God's word comes from Psalm chapter 9, verse 9. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. In these times where our government, the government that hates us, seems bent on usurping and oppressing our God-given rights, we need to turn to the Lord, study his word, the very book that inspired the founding of our constitutional republic. Now, the Bible, along with our Constitution, are our strongholds in this time. Working together and studying the Word and putting it into action, we can change the course our state and our nation are on right now. And we can do it this election year. Until next week, I humbly pray and ask that you stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.